Hello and welcome to this podcast again this week. And this week I'm so excited because I have Nick Hazell, who is an amazing man who has achieved such a lot and is an inspiration to me. And he recently was very open about his success, but also his experience of burnout. So I'm going to invite him to just be honest and open with us today in the hope that he has some tools that he's used and some clues for us to watch out for so that we can learn from his honesty and his vulnerability, really. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming. So do you want to tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try and keep it as quick as possible because I have ADHD, so I love to talk and I love to not get to the point. So I'll try to. I've been working in the mental health field now for about 15 years. Before that, I worked in a few marketing jobs. I worked as a travel agent, but nothing really sat with me career-wise. Get my words out. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was working at the Priory and just saw a job for me as a sales support admin. So I thought, well, I'll get in at the bottom and I can work my way up. So I spent 9 years at the Priory. I started as a sales support admin down in Roehampton. And throughout the years, I pretty much worked across all the acute sites. My job was to take the psychiatrists, therapists, staff out to GPs, do education, etc., and just basically create relationships between them. So I was more of a relationship manager than a salesperson. And I worked my way up to being responsible for the whole sales team and the private division there at the age of 32, which was, really impressive to be in such a kind of formal role at that age. But at the same time, in my personal life, my twins were just born, but they were born very early. And so I wasn't getting much sleep. I was having a lot of pressure of the job. I then got measles and encephalitis about 3 months into the twins being born. So I was told I was going to have to learn to walk and talk again. So that night, you can imagine what went through my head. And I went through every emotion, but I came out the next morning like, I'm not going to let this beat me. And I responded incredibly well. Luck, mentality, whatever it might be, but I managed to get back to full health after 3 months off work. And I went back into work and realized that I wasn't really happy. Like, the dream was to be at the top, right? That's what you always dream of. But once I got near it, firstly, with ADHD, sitting in a 3-hour board meeting for a 5-minute input is not the best use of my time. And I struggled with that. But I struggled also being behind the computer all the time. I'm very much, I love talking to people, going out. I love designing, developing things. I don't like the mundane side of life. And before COVID, that was fine. And we obviously then transitioned into something different. But I got to the point where I didn't want success to me wasn't about being at the top, CEO, director of everything. It was about having a work-life balance, watching my kids grow up, really important to me because I didn't have that much when I was younger. So I started Hazell Partners 4.5 years ago, which I go out with any mental health addiction offering in the world. And I build their business based on my experience, but also based on my very large, call it a black book of contacts. And throughout the last 4.5 years, I developed a webinar during COVID that just blew up and expanded. So from that, I started a conference, and then this whole events arm came about 2 years ago. So I compartmentalized that to Hazell Forums, and that is now run by another director who that's all about conferences. We do networking, we do round tables. We're trying to drive the industry forward. And then Hazell Partners, I provide business development for new entrants to the market, psychiatrists, therapists that want to grow their practice. And ultimately, I probably have the largest black book in the industry. So I'm very much used for that as well, because I can open up doors quickly. So I hope that kind of gives an idea of what I'm about. Not really to the point, but a bit of my background and how I got here.
It does. Really, really interesting story. And I suppose what the listeners would like to hear is, why have you come open? Why have you opened up about having burnt out? Because you've obviously been very successful. Why at this point have you decided to come clean?
I was told at previous jobs that I was way too nice to get to the top. Right, I wear my heart on my sleeve. People, will take advantage of that. And I thought, well, I watched, being in big business and realizing you can't really have a heart in big business. You've got to make tough decisions. And I couldn't do that. I cared too much. So I suppose from that perspective, that's part of my personality. So when I started my business, it was about honesty and integrity, drilled into me when I was younger, but always doing the right thing regardless of the outcome. And I thought, can I do that in business? But also, if I'm myself in business, then there's nothing against me. There's nothing behind the eyes, so to speak. And if you speak to my colleagues, they'll say I'm exactly the same at work as I am in front of my friends and family. So honesty has been something that's really key to me. And as you know, I straight away said I've got ADHD. It's just a common thing for me to tell people. But I remember a scenario that I can't go into too much because it might let know who the person was. But I was away with a group of clinicians and I was like, right, I'm spending 7 days with these guys. I'm going to let them know straight off. And I just said, I've got ADHD. I'm really proud of it. It might annoy you a bit, but it's who I am. And, someone there, pulled me to one side and just said, you know what, I've just recently been diagnosed with Asperger's, much older in age. And he said, honestly, that meant the world to me that you showed such confidence. And I was like, oh, sorry. I mean, I didn't do it for that. I did it actually just so people wouldn't get annoyed by me. And then the next day he told the whole group and he was crying about it. And he was telling me that he's really struggled with that diagnosis because it's kind of like explained everything, but also he doesn't want people knowing. And I was initially the same with ADHD, but from that moment, I realized there's so much power in honesty because actually it allows people to, I'm always free thinking. I'm always talking, everything that's on my mind, but there's some strength in that. And when I recently went through my diagnosis, I didn't know what was wrong at the time. And someone that I know very well said to me, "You're all right." And I did the classic, yeah, I'm fine, trying to move it on. He said, "No, are you all right?" It's the second, "No, are you all right?" And he just said, "You aren't yourself." And I said, "I don't know what's wrong. I feel like the world's imploding, but I'm doing really well. I've got a smile on my face. And in my mind, I think I'm okay, but I'm really struggling, but I don't know what it is." So he said, "Well, let's get an assessment. Let's talk through this and see what can come from that." And lo and behold, my assessment actually said that I was severely depressed. I was highly anxious, so anxiety disorder. And I was on the questionnaire for burnout. I was basically 4 marks. So I should be burnt out. And I've always lived on the edge of that because ADHD is very much about your moods fluctuating up and down. So you kind of dip into depression, but I notice it now. And so therefore, I just have to change a few things and I can come out. But with this, I was deep in. And I didn't even realize. And I think that's the key to certainly to this today is that when I went to put that post up, all the things went through my mind. I rewrote it about 20 times. I thought, my clients that I'm working with going to be like, "Oh, we can't cope. Maybe we'll pull the contract. Will this reflect badly on the business?" And it came back to that point of what strength I gave when I was very open about the ADHD. And I just said, you know what? It's who I am. People know me that I'm open and honest. And actually, maybe there might be some strength in seeing the happy, really fun guy that you see now. Actually, behind it all is depressed, highly anxious, and burnt out. Yeah. And so I put it up there, and I genuinely was, it stops me in my tracks with the amount of people that resonated with it. And, the words that came from, people were saying it's really courageous and brave. And I never thought about it as being brave. I just thought about it as actually, I think it's part of my journey of getting through this is that if I let people know, they can be kinder. If I'm maybe a bit flippant or a bit rude, they'll understand that I'm not my usual self. So I thought, there's strength in that. But so many people came to me and said, you know what, one person phoned me and said 2 months ago, I was in a really, really dark place. And this has given me such strength to get it sorted. Wow. So many people said that they've been where I am, but you would never know it. Like that person that called me, I was working with, like, no way would I know that anything was wrong there. And it was so incredibly eye-opening, the amount of people that have been through burnout, depression, anxiety, stress, and have been through what I've been going through. And I'm still going through it now. I'm not hiding from that fact. But what it really showed was that there's so much power in that honesty. In fact, there's so much strength in it, right? You think it's a weakness. Certainly men do. I'm generalizing, but you got to the stiff upper lip kind of thing. And actually, I've realized there's so much more strength in showing your vulnerability than not showing it, because that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem. People won't talk about it. They won't show their vulnerability because they see it as a weakness, when actually you can look at the post online. I don't think one person there has said you're weak. In fact, they've all said the opposite, like the words like brave and courageous. So that was a real, learning point for me, that everyone has issues, everyone has stories. And I remember my wife saying to me, I was going to do a big presentation to the CEOs at Priory, and I was really nervous. And she was like, look, they still go to bed at night. They still clean their teeth. They still have worries. They still have kids' issues. They have concerns. They're human beings. Think of them like human beings. They're no different to you. They have the same stuff. And actually, that really helps, because I walked in the room and didn't put these people on pedestals. I just talked to them like I'm talking to you now. So, it's very much a learning curve for me, but it's been probably the best thing I could have done. Even my wife said to me, I didn't realize, you were struggling that bad. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell anyone, even my own family. I didn't want to be like that. So,
amazing. So yeah. I've got two questions. So before I ask you what you've done to overcome the burnout, to heal, I suppose, and it sounds like you're still on that journey, can I ask what you would say to people out there who, like me, burnt out? And my burnout was quite different, because I had a lot of very physical signs in my body where things weren't working, and it looked like I kept having mini heart attacks, that sort of thing. But when I told people about it, some of them were really critical and very judgmental of me, calling me weak and calling me a little bit, I suppose, of a loser, if you like, and that there was something wrong with me because I wasn't strong enough to deal with my world. And I wonder what you would say to those people who've had that experience.
God, that's a good question. Firstly, it's just mind-blowing that people would say that. And I think, thinking it from the outside, I think those people were probably burnt out as well, and they were putting it on you for being so honest. So it's really sad that people are like that. Remind me of the question again, because my head went off then.
It's how do people respond when they tell someone that they're going through an episode of burnout, or that they have burnt out, and when people are actually quite critical or judgmental or unkind in their response? So you've had an amazing response from people saying you're courageous and strong. What about those other responses? How would you support people who don't get that kind response?
It's like I really said before, that I always, and I've learned from this and over the years of working in it, that people have their own problems behind the closed doors. And actually, I learned that from a very good boss that said to me, take yourself outside the situation and just consider that they're probably going through something. And there was, again, I can't say too much, but there was a moment when there was a guy that was really horrible to a lot of people, really didn't like anyone. And he was the guy. And I ended up having a beer with the work party and realized that in his personal life, there were close family members going through some really horrendous stuff. Yeah. So he was putting it out to the world. And as soon as you look at it from a different lens, all of a sudden you have empathy. And if they're nasty to you, you go, it's not me, it's them. They're struggling. That they're getting their issues and they're putting them out onto other people, because that's how they cope. How you cope when you've got burnout is that you want to tell people, because that's part of the healing process. So just because you're doing it that way, and just because they're doing it the other way, you're both trying to achieve the same thing, actually, which is some people are screaming for help, but they don't know it. And others are being honest. And like I said, when I said earlier to you, that those people, it's kind of like jealousy, but it's not subconsciously, that, if they're telling you you're weak, it's because they know deep down that they're probably really struggling, and how they could never be like that, because they've got to be strong. Upbringing, certainly my parents' generation, for example, very different to mine. My parents' generation was post-war, very much stiff upper lip, get on with things. My childhood was very, well, in comparison, very, very different. So we're not as resilient as we are before, but that's because we haven't been through, as a nation, incredibly hard times. We're going through the quietest period ever. So there's an element of being kinder to yourself on it, because just because you're not resilient enough doesn't mean that you're a lesser person.
No, you're not weak. So what would you give as sort of helpful hints to people who are going through a similar type of burnout that you had, or their own type of burnout? What would be your key message to them of what helps?
I mean, this will be my personal experience. It's different for everyone. Identifying burnout is really hard. because burnout is mixed in with stress, depression, anxiety. You might have stuff going on in your life, right, that's out of your control. You might just think, you know what, it's really, really heavy at the time. It's why I'm feeling this way. I filled out that questionnaire that you can easily get online, right? And they're not all right, because a lot of them are trying to sell you something. So be careful with those. But ultimately, if you don't feel yourself, if your behaviors aren't the same as they were when you felt happy, and I talk about behaviors as I talk about exercise, nutrition, honestly, it's so key. People don't talk about it enough, but I know when I'm stressed because I go for a can of Coke, sugar. I know when I'm stressed because I want to eat something bad. All of a sudden, I was eating bad things. I was ordering takeaways. I'd never ordered takeaways before. I stopped doing my exercise. All of these little things, actually looking back, it's really obvious that I was burnt out, but I didn't see it at the time because I was struggling to find the effort to do the things that I always do. Family would come over. I was struggling to even talk to them, hang about. I literally talk to everyone. I love talking. So I think part of recognizing that you might be there, and the key is actually that you might be on the way to burnout, because if you can catch yourself then, it's about looking at when you were happy, what was in your life that was making you happy. Now there's external influences that you can't control, but ultimately at that time when you felt really happy, what were you doing? And most of the time it will be you were doing positive things. You were looking after yourself, you were kinder to yourself mentally and physically. So I suppose it's a case of stopping and thinking. My biggest problem was I didn't know what was wrong. And that in itself means that something's wrong because I couldn't identify it. So if you've got that foggy mind and you can't find the effort to do anything, I had no enjoyment in anything all of a sudden. I was like, looking back, it's so obvious. I didn't enjoy anything anymore. No hobbies. I just enjoyed sitting on the sofa and staring at the TV. People listening to this will go, well, that was obvious. It's not in the time, because it's not like depression just hits you or burnout hits you. This has been an accumulation of a year and a half of stress and anxiety and not dealing with it, i.e. getting out the house, getting some exercise to clear my anxiety and stress. And my commute is 20 yards, so there's a lot in it. Like I said, burnout shows in different ways, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's different for everyone, but you will know in yourself. If I could give any advice, it's just to sit back and go, am I the person that I usually am? And I think that will help a lot.
That's just magic, because actually, if people listening to this now can just stop for a moment and think, have I stopped exercising? Am I eating less well? Am I not connecting with people? How are my moods, and am I sleeping? All those different things. If we can stop to think, hold on a minute, how am I today? Is there something I need to change? Because what the research shows is if we take tiny, tiny steps and consistently put them back in, we can recover much more quickly than if we try and change everything all at once.
That's the danger. I'm now going through therapy as well, which I haven't done for a long time. Ironically, I work in mental health. I should, be going through it. But what I realized before was whenever I felt a certain way, I'd be like, right, focus on this. And so I'd start running again, but I'd have to do 5K. Now, if you tell yourself when you get up in the morning, you've got to run 5K for half an hour of your day, you will do it at the start, but you'll get the 3-month itch, 2-month, whatever it is. And you'll be like, oh, I won't do it today. What I decided was, actually, I'm not going to try and change everything, my whole diet, everything. I'm just going to take small incremental steps. So now every day I run 1K. It's like 6 minutes of my day. It's embarrassing to not do it because it's like it's 6 minutes. So I just put that into my morning and I've started doing the 1Ks. And now all of a sudden I'm feeling myself doing 1.2K and 1.3K, but I'm taking it easy, changing my diet. I'm not trying to change everything. I will still have bad food in my diet, but as long as the majority is good. So I think that is exactly the point, that it's about those small incremental steps. Because if you try and change everything, especially when you're stressed and anxious, it will just make it worse. Yeah. Just do one thing every day. Sleep's a massive indicator of issues of anxiety. And I don't have much sleep, so I didn't identify it from that because I've never slept well. But that's just who I am. I need 5 hours a night. But it's the subconscious behaviors that will tell you something's wrong. Your moods, your behaviors, your sleep, the way you are around people. If people say, oh, you don't seem yourself at the moment. Oh, no, I'm fine. Comments. There are so many indicators that I could have caught this way much earlier. And I work in mental health, and it's really ironic that I listen to burnout talks, stress, depression, anxiety every day. I didn't even see it myself. So that shows that you do really have to stop.
Yeah.
Take a step back.
Yeah. But that's why I'm so grateful to you for coming and talking to people, because I think it's so encouraging for us normal people that, you know, even people working in the sector. I spoke last couple of weeks, I spoke to a psychologist who had burnt out, and she was saying even psychologists can burn out because life is so fast and we're so busy watching other people, caring for our family, caring for our team, whatever it happens to be for us, we forget to look after ourselves, don't we?
And I think the key to it is that anyone and everyone can get this. It's not you're a certain type with burnout. You will see some of the most high-flying lawyers, CEOs, to, you know, people on the street. Everyone is susceptible to it, and you will get that way if you don't look after yourself. I'm a walking example of that. So
yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time, Nick. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And, thanks everyone for listening, and we'd love any feedback on this session if you want to share it. Take care. Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com, or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.